Welcome to today's four-piece podcast. Today we have a guest. Her name is Sundari Malcolm. She is from the United States. She lived in Harlem for a long period of time. She stayed up and down the East Coast for a while, and then she moved to Germany. And her move to Germany was a journey, so to speak. And we watch her journey go about and what she's doing now. We're going to be right back with Sundari Malcolm. Wonderful interview, wonderful guest. We'll be right back right after this.
See it, Matt. He's at home. Just doing yourself. Hey crew, I'm just down at Phillip Island checking out some of the GP bikes and going through some teams. Come across this young fella, showing him the rocket fuel. What does he do?
Always went out of my bag.
Jesus,
I love it. It's good stuff.
how long have you been using it, brother?
Oh, a couple of years now. 2 years I've been using it.
I just heard the story of his first time use. You've got to listen.
So the first time I used it, I was in a bit of a rush trying to get to the gym. Quickly go to the bottom, I just seen 4. So I just grabbed 4 of the full droppers I took. Instead of 4 drops, 4 full droppers. And my head nearly exploded. I thought I was going to die, but then when it came good, put $1 million. I just need the body to equalise for about 5 minutes.
Here we are, fucking in with the team. What comes out of his bag?
Well, let me try it. I'm off.
What's up?
Yeah.
That's it, mate. Where's it home? Tastes alright. Careful, there's little bits. It's good for it. Feel better now.
Yeah, really.
You love it?
Good, yeah, love it. I really do love it. It's a good product.
Let's go.
Get yours today at savvytouch.com. Use code Goggins for a 15% discount.
Welcome back to the Four-Piece Podcast. You know, I always have very interesting guests on this podcast. Great guests from all over the world. Now, this one counts as all over the world. She's in Germany. She's originally from, and I really love this because right now at the time of this recording, it's noon where I am, and it's a 6-hour difference?
It is.
So it's
6:07.
6:07. So there you go. So it is evening where she is, and I'm sure she's like, my day is done. Could you please hurry up and get this over with? But you know, our day has just begun. So welcome to the program. Thank you so much. This is Sundari Malcolm, and she is originally from my home state of New York. Now, I said home state of New York. She's not from Buffalo. She's from the other part that Buffalonians don't like talking about. Could you please go ahead and get on before I start rolling? Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone who is watching, who's listening. This is Sundari Malcolm. And yes, as you mentioned, I'm originally from New York. I'm from Harlem, New York, and left Harlem when I was right before high school. And if people are familiar with Westchester, New York, my mother and I moved to Chappaqua, New York, where I stayed until college.
Very nice. Now, you lived in New York, but you know what? You are really, I don't want to say you're a free spirit, but literally, you are now enjoying yourself on another continent. How did you get from where you were to where you are?
Let's see. If we're just talking about travel, do you want me to weave the grief into this as well?
I want you to weave it. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
It does inform the story. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in Harlem and later moved to Westchester, but I was raised between New York and a spiritual ashram. So, if people are unfamiliar with what an ashram is, it's a spiritual community, which at the time, I was born in 1980. So this was to parents who were Black and teachers and living in New York themselves, and were kind of ahead of the time in terms of what's considered mainstream now with regards to meditation and yoga and being a vegan. And so that's how I was raised, and left for college, went to the University of Delaware. And when I was in my 5th year, my mother was diagnosed for the second time with breast cancer. And so she had been diagnosed for the first time when I was in high school and had gone into remission and was now diagnosed again. And so I became her caregiver, and I moved home. And at that time, I am now 21 and was put into the role of being a full-time caregiver. And for those who understand what caregiving is like, all of a sudden you are a nurse, and a doctor and an insurance agent and an emotional support, and the roles had significantly shifted. At that time, I was not doing this work. I'm now a birth, grief, and death doula and the founder of a spiritual grief and death doula training academy. At that time, I was working in public relations. I was waitressing and bartending. I was the VIP manager of Webster Hall for a portion of my years. And I tried really hard to kind of hang on to being a 20-year-old back in New York City, and doing what the rest of my friends were doing, which was living really full lives and figuring out who they were. And at a certain point, it became clear that I needed to be a caregiver full time and leave my work and really be there for my mother and for the end of her life. And so she passed when I was 27. My father would be diagnosed with brain cancer in 2010, suddenly while being at work. He fell ill and into a coma, and when he was awakened, he was told that he had less than a year to live, and he died in 2011. That journey, which is grief, started as a caregiver and then continued on. And for a bit, I really was wrapped in with, if grievers are listening to this, then you understand that feeling of that grief fog that happens in the beginning. I wasn't doing much of anything at that time. It was a lot of just laying around and trying to make sense of what had just happened in my life. And it was then that I decided to take a yoga retreat. And I was familiar with retreats, having been raised on an ashram. But I knew that I was at that point of grief where I wanted to be around people without really having to talk to them. I just wanted kind of the noise around me. I knew that while I'd grown up with spiritual practices, but it's kind of like anything your parents offer to you. You do it perhaps because that's what everyone else is doing in your circle, your community, but not because you're instinctively choosing it yourself. But at that point, I knew that I needed to start pulling on the practices I had been raised with. And so I went to Guatemala. And that was my first solo trip, though with a group, and my first time leaving the country by myself. And it shifted everything for me. It shifted my approach to my own grief, because I really understood at that time how beneficial it was to practice breathing, how beneficial it was to move my body, how much it was helping me to be part of that community again, and around people that were looking at wellness as something not that just happened in the mind, but that also could be facilitated in the body. And that shifted my career path and also my travel path. My career path meant that I decided to become a yoga teacher at that time. And so I got certified in every single thing I could think of that felt good in my soul. And it was my clients who started asking me to work with them one-on-one. And that started leading into grief doula work and eventually into death doula work. And that's continued now for 17 years. In terms of travel, I went from Guatemala to India, to Italy, to Costa Rica, and eventually wound up living in Miami. I had left New York, spent my 30s in Miami, and I fell in love with the tiny house movement. And I started going to festivals and really looking at wow, there were all these people that I had not been aware of this, what is a huge community, but I had not been aware of.
Right.
Off-grid living and sustainable living. There were families living in buses and vans and really beautiful ones. And I became kind of obsessed. And so at that time, I sold everything and converted a school bus into a beautiful tiny home and traveled the United States with my then husband. And it was incredible. Brought on a lot of corporate sponsors, did a mindfulness tour throughout the US teaching, which coincided with the civil rights movement that was uprising throughout the United States at that time. It was really amazing. I learned a lot. Living in a bus was truly incredible, and so was the community. And it was in 2021 that I think something that happens in grief is that you start to, and excuse my language, but like your bandwidth for bullshit really shrinks, right? And once you have built up a level of peace around you and calm around you, and you're managing yourself, you start to be unable to deal with things that interrupt that.
Right.
And so I left a toxic marriage and a toxic country. America did not feel good in my soul at that time. And I moved to Curacao, and I lived there for a year and absolutely fell in love with it. It's called the Healing Island. If people aren't aware of where Curacao is, it's right in the ABC Islands, so Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao. It is a hop, skip, and a jump from New York, DC, or Florida. I suggest everyone to visit.
Absolutely.
It's really phenomenal. And it was just the perfect place to connect back into nature and to be quiet and still. And that's where my work really flourished again. And I wrote my book, Grief Gems. And I wound up falling in love with an Austrian who was living in Germany. And we spent a long time on that island. And then I moved to Germany, and I've been here now for almost 4 years. And so life has been beautiful and tragic and all of the things.
You know, you talk about life being beautiful, and
Yeah.
I'm going back, and it is absolutely beautiful. I'm going back to my time when you said something, and you said in my 20s, I went back to become a caregiver of my mother.
Mhm.
And I thought about in my 20s. And then I'm looking at my children in their 20s, and I'm looking at their friends in their 20s, and I'm looking at all of the things that I did in my 20s. Now I'm going to tell you right now, I love my mother, I loved my father, you know, but I could not. I got to say this in the right way. Number one, my kids now are in that age. I mean, they range from 20 to or sorry, from 30 to I got their ages to 17. All right. I had to
Getting
really think
there.
about that for a second. But they range. But I would not expect any of them at this point in time. Okay. And I wouldn't even ask them,
Yeah.
to go back. You willingly went back. Um, and you did something, and again, you did it for an extended period of time. This wasn't like 5 months, I wanted to take care of my mom and then I came back. You did it for an extended period of time. um and as I was thinking about that, and I know that this is not your case, so don't think about that. I was thinking about, is there a part of your life that you missed? I mean, because I mean, and I'm not saying that I don't. It sounds selfish to say it,
It's
but
a,
yeah.
I think it's a very valid question, and I think it's one that any caregiver struggles with that, right? One of the reasons why I started working with caregivers in general was because there was so much missing in terms of the conversation directed at us. And some of the things that were missing were the anger that you feel at the position that you find yourself in, right? I don't know that I feel like I willingly chose. I didn't feel like I had an option. My
Okay.
father was not part of my life. I didn't have siblings. My mother didn't have close family that lived nearby. We didn't have close family that lived nearby. And so it really was on me. Now, that has also been part of my own healing journey of that was a lot to ask of a child who was partying at college, who was,
Right.
I was as far from being that role as I could have been. Um, and so I do think there was a lot that I missed. There's twofold to that. One, I do think that I partied well in high school and college. And so I do feel like there were some things that I got out of my system. That being said, yeah, there was a freedom that I missed, right? I spent my entire 20s tethered to my phone waiting for a doctor or some other horrible news. I still
Right.
keep my phone off, and I'm 44 years old. I've never turned my ringer back on because it's like PTSD, like years and years and years of that. I couldn't just hang out. I always had to come home, right? I couldn't just go have a great time and go travel. I needed to stay nearby. I not only needed to stay nearby, but I needed to stay abreast of things that are normally not part of a 20 something year old's dialogue, like medical terms and insurance terms and learning how to give injections, right? These are all part of what you do, caring for a physical body. So yes, but I think I've arrived at the place through a lot of self-work, a lot of shadow work, a lot of self-work, a lot of, collective work with people who are grievers like me, of understanding that on one hand, did I miss out a lot? Yes. On the other, is my entire life now full of all of those experiences, and what I've literally created a life around has been those experiences. So who would I be right now if that had not happened?
One thing that I have to admit is your sense of, I don't want to say it's a sense of risk. It's a sense of adventure. You go, you want to go and experience a place. A lot of us, and it is true. I mean, a lot of people right now listening to this podcast right now, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to call you all out when I say this. You can't afford to leave. Okay, you can afford to go. You can afford to branch out. I mean, I know people who live, I was one of them. I lived in Buffalo, New York for years, 21 years of my life. I lived in Buffalo, New York. Okay. And I go back to Buffalo now, and now I go back in my 50s, and there are complete areas that I have never been to. And they were like 5 minutes from our house. Now, in your case, you have gone. I mean, you just named like 4 different countries in the time of this short conversation. You do live. Now, it's not just the fact that you are going to a different place. You are experiencing different things. And it could be in the same place. It could be, you don't have to leave your house to do that. I mean, but you are experiencing and doing other things. What gave you that desire to really experience this planet in the way it should be experienced?
Something happens when I'll start with this. Something happens when you lose your parents. One is that no matter your age, you feel like an orphan.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying in the sense that there's like no one checking for you. There's no one congratulating you. There's nobody like looking to make sure you got in safely. It's all just all of a sudden you are out in the world untethered. The other side of that is that if you allow there's a lot of freedom in that, which means that a lot of us have spent our lives in answer to other people's opinions of us, often our parents, our siblings, our coworkers, our neighbors. When you don't have somebody whose opinion matters that much to you anymore, all of a sudden there's some freedom to take some risks, right? To say, you know what, I'd like to see what this place looks like. I'd like to try this. I'd like to be this different version of myself. Because often we remain so tightly tied, not the best grammar, but so connected to versions of ourselves because we're afraid of disconnecting from community. But when you've lost that sense of community, then it's like, well, now I get to try on a lot of different sides and see what feels good and what doesn't. And I think that winds up building a really beautiful life. I think the other part of it is that I work in death and grief.
Right.
And so so many people, I've collected this now over 17 years of work, how often you hear, I just wish I had lived bigger. I wish I had done more. I wish I had listened less to other people. It's everybody's regret. Very few people don't hold that regret. And that's quite sad.
And when my father was passing away, 2 days before he died, I asked him the question because my father, it's a very interesting relationship. I do miss him dearly, but one thing I asked him, because of something he said to me, and what I asked him, I said, "Are you afraid?" And he was 79 years old, and he shook his head, yes. What you are doing now in you said you deal in death and you work in death. You said something to me the last time we talked that I said to myself, I wish my father had you around to help him with that transition. and you are helping so many people. Can you explain to the audience what you're doing now?
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I am a grief and death doula. With regards to grief work, I support the individual, the family, or the organization. And so, if there is an individual that is dealing with loss, let's say the loss of a sibling or a best friend, then they work with me. Sometimes entire families bring me in because they've all lost a person, right? A member of their family. Sometimes organizations bring me in, and that's because they've lost either a team member or collectively their team is dealing with a lot of grief outside of work and they're trying to see how to manage professionalism and productivity, right? When it comes to death doula work, again, sometimes I'm hired by the individual and sometimes I'm hired by the family. And so sometimes people will wonder, well, how does that work without the other one? And I think back to my own parents, and this is why I made the decision to do death doula work. My mother, I was the caregiver for her, but we also had her in hospice at home. And some of the women that were connected to that hospice were the most amazing human beings that I've ever witnessed. And I remember one of them rubbing her feet, right? And one of them singing over her. And we brought in somebody that did Reiki and we played music and had incense burning. And that to me has always stuck with me as like, what a beautiful transition, right? And this was before I did any of that work, but these women around also understood how important that was. And then I think about my relationship with my father, which was quite complicated, and I was not there when he passed. And the reason why I also do this work is because there are lots of people who are estranged from their families, right? Lots of people who don't have friends and family surrounding them. And so there are reasons. Sometimes it's because there is a family that needs to have you facilitate conversation. Sometimes it's an individual that wants you to reconnect them with family. Sometimes you're just there to hold space for things that they wish to say and want to say before they transition. Sometimes you're helping them plan funerals, writing obituaries. The reason why so many work with me is because I come from a spiritual background. And so I am a big believer of the grace that must be extended to the transition, the ceremonies and rituals that should be surrounding you as you transition, all of the ways where the physical body is cared for, but also the emotional body. There is a belief specifically in ancient indigenous cultures that this is not the end. And
Right.
so this physical body dying is simply just a transition, and you must prepare oneself for what comes next. And so that is a lot of my work, is preparing you for what comes next.
That is a beautiful thing because this is not the end.
No, it's not.
It is not. But there is still, and I love what you talk about because there is still a level of uncertainty, because we haven't seen it. We've heard about it, we've talked about it, but we've not yet seen it. And I think that your your service, what you do absolutely helps in at least reducing that anxiety and that level of anxiousness of crossing over. Because I really do think, and I've heard so many different things about people I mean the thin veil between, life and death. I've heard a whole bunch of different things. But I also, even though I know that, my time will come to an end one day, I am going to tell you right now, I probably have that same level of fear that my father had, and maybe even a little bit more. And again, having someone like you around definitely helps in that transition. What you have said in this thing today, what you've said in this podcast today, it's beautiful. And one thing that I really want the audience to get out of it, and if you have something else that you would like to get out of it, please, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say it. But one thing is number one, she continues, continues to show selflessness. There is a high level of selflessness with you, with what you're doing and how you're doing it. What you did for reaching out to, going back and helping your mother through that process is something that's beautiful. And now going to people literally all over the world, because I know you just don't keep it to Germany. You have online services, and again, I'll have all of her podcasts. I'll have all of her links in the podcast notes. But yeah, I think it's beautiful. And the other thing that I love is that you live. Yes, there's a level of grief, but there is life, and you are doing it. And when that time comes, when it comes for everybody, you've done what you wanted to do, and that's a beautiful thing. Sundari, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Again, you will be able to reach her. Her information will be in the podcast notes. Anything you'd like to add before we're finished?
Just to all those who are listening and watching, just whatever you're moving through, and so many of us are moving through so much at this time, just knowing that you have you're so much more capable and powerful than you believe yourself to be. And I just invite you to be gentle with yourself in this upcoming season.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We'll be right back right after this.
Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. At DNP, we bring your dream, purpose, and passion to life in print. Whether your manuscript is ready to go or just an idea waiting to unfold, we're here to guide you. With expert editing, stunning graphics, and the knowledge to make your book a reality, we'll help you share it with the world. From book festivals to signings, this is your moment. Let's turn your dream, purpose, and passion into print. Connect with us today and make your dream a reality.
Welcome back to the Four Piece Podcast. I hope you absolutely enjoyed Sundari's interview. It's funny how grief and just life circumstances forces us to move. And what I like about Sundari's interview was she didn't stop moving through all of her grief. Through all of the things that she had to go through, she kept moving forward. And now she's living a great life, running a business and doing things to help others go through the process of leaving this earth. I don't want to use the other word, and we know what the other word is of, the synonym of leaving this earth is, we know the word. But in her case, she has really done great things in helping people make that transition. It is something that, I have seen that crossover where you watch somebody go through fear and acceptance and this, that, and the other. And I didn't do it the way she does it. I know that, and you'll see it later on when I discuss it even further. But even when my father was passing away, it was a transition where it was the stages of that transition through his eyes, and also of me witnessing this transition. There were stages as well, and what she does brings a little bit more peace, and I'm going to use that word. It brings a lot of peace to that transition. But besides that, what she does and what she has done and how she has literally through all of her experiences in life, she has built on those, and she hasn't been stuck in those. And that is the beautiful thing about it. And I hope you enjoyed that interview, and I hope you got I hope you got that out of that video as well, that she is no longer, and she is not stuck in those circumstances. She moves forward, and it was a great interview. She's a great person. This will not be the last time you hear or see Sundari. She is in the beautiful country of Germany. This podcast is going worldwide. Australia, Germany, United States, Canada, UK, you name it. We are finding different places. And, I would love to maybe one day find somebody on the continent of Africa. We have not had anybody from the continent of Africa on this program yet, and I would love to have somebody on the continent of Africa on this program. It would be an honor. It really would. So if you know somebody who owns a business or does something extraordinary in the continent of Africa, doesn't matter what country, please, I would love to talk to them. Love to have them on the program and talk to them as well. A couple things. Hey, you know what? Like and subscribe the YouTube channel. Please, share it with someone. I would love to have you on it and be a part of it. There are a lot of things going on with the 4 Ps podcast. There's a lot of things going on the author Trunnis Goggins page. That's where you can find the 4 Ps podcast. That's where you can see other things about the 4 Ps. And we are building it every single day. Past episodes are on that. It is great. I mean, episodes from all the way back before we even went video is on that podcast. So please like, subscribe, share it with your friends. This is a great podcast. This is a podcast to motivate. And like I said, there are other things coming on that channel that you are going to like, and a lot of motivational pieces that can help you through your day, and it can help you get unstuck. Remember, these are real stories with real purpose. We'll be back next week, and next week we will have another wonderful, I don't know where we are going to be in the world yet, because, I change, and sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing. See you next week, though. That's one thing I know. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.